Why do you think we have to work 5 days a week? It feels so normal that most of us never stop to question it, but honestly, who decided 5 days of work and 2 days off was the perfect arrangement? Well, instead of guessing, let's go in the depth and find out ourselves. Before this neat little 5-day routine you know today, life worked very differently. Farmers rose with the sun, worked the land, and rested when daylight faded. Their schedule was set by nature itself. Craftsmen lived much the same way. They worked when there was something to make, repair, or sell, and paused when there wasn't. Work flowed with the seasons, the weather, and the needs of daily life. There was no clear line between work time and personal time. Then came the Industrial Revolution, and suddenly work changed forever. Factories needed to run constantly. Machines didn't care if you were tired, sick, or simply human. Workers often labored 12 to 16 hours a day, 6 days a week, sometimes even 7. Imagine waking up before sunrise, working until dark, and doing it all over again the next day. For everyone, this wasn't unusual. Free time was a luxury few could afford. But eventually, people had enough. Industrial work wasn't just tiring, it consumed lives. Long hours left workers exhausted, injured, and often sick. Families barely saw one another, and tragically, even children were often part of the workforce. Apparently, the factory's hiring policy was simply, if you can stand, you can work. As cities grew, workers began talking, comparing, and realizing something crucial. This wasn't just difficult, it was deeply unfair. With newspapers spreading ideas and worker groups bringing people together, their frustrations turned into a shared movement. For the first time, millions were asking for the same thing, a life that included more than just work. And once that idea took hold, there was no putting it back in the box. One of the first people to say, "Surely there's a better way," was Robert Owen. He proposed a simple but revolutionary idea: 8 hours for work, 8 hours for recreation, and 8 hours for rest. Today, that sounds perfectly reasonable. Back then, it sounded almost rebellious, as if wanting sleep and free time was asking for far too much. But the idea caught on. Workers organized, labor unions formed, and protests spread across countries. They weren't just demanding shorter hours, they were demanding dignity, health, and a life that existed beyond the factory walls. And once that movement began, the world of work would never be quite the same again. After years of strikes, protests, and workers refusing to accept endless labor as a way of life, they finally won something huge: one guaranteed day off, Sunday. At first, that day of rest came largely from Christian Sabbath traditions. It was the first official crack in the wall of non-stop work. But once workers got a taste of free time, they wanted more. And honestly, who could blame them? In many places, workers began unofficially extending their break by taking Monday off as well, a tradition known as Saint Monday. Employers were not amused. Apparently, employees enjoying themselves on company-unapproved time was deeply concerning. Then came another victory. By the mid-1800s, Saturday started shrinking. First, it became a half day, giving workers a precious Saturday afternoon. Later, some companies dropped Saturday work altogether. In 1908, a New England cotton mill became one of the first to offer a full 2-day weekend so Jewish workers could observe the Saturday Sabbath while Christian workers could still rest on Sunday. It's a fascinating reminder that the work week wasn't shaped by economics alone. Culture and religion played a major role too. Then came the real game changer: Henry Ford. In 1926, Ford Motor Company adopted a 5-day, 40-hour work week. At first, it seemed generous, even risky. Why pay workers for fewer hours? But Ford understood something powerful. Well-rested workers were more productive, they made fewer mistakes, they stayed longer. And, perhaps most importantly, if workers had free time, they could spend money, including, of course, on cars. It was genius. Ford wasn't just selling automobiles, he was helping create the modern consumer economy. Ford had shown that a shorter work week could actually work, but it took a global crisis to turn that idea into the norm. When the Great Depression hit, jobs became painfully scarce. With unemployment soaring, governments had to rethink how work was distributed. The logic was simple: if one person worked a little less, perhaps another person could work at all. Then came a landmark moment. In 1938, the United States passed the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938. It introduced overtime pay and firmly pushed the standard workweek towards 40 hours. By 1940, the 5-day workweek was no longer just an innovative company policy or a progressive experiment. It had become the national standard, official, widespread, and here to stay. After a long journey through farms, factories, protests, and policy, the modern workweek had finally found its shape. Now, you might wonder why 5 days exactly. Because it was the sweet spot. 6 days left little room for life, while 4 seemed too radical for the time. 5 offered the perfect balance, enough work to keep the economy moving, and enough rest to keep people moving too. And as American businesses expanded globally, so did their working model. Countries around the world gradually adopted similar labor structures. And the 5-day workweek didn't just change work, it reshaped everyday life. Our school schedules, shopping habits, family gatherings, vacations, and even when movies release or sports are played all revolve around it. The weekend alone created entire industries, from tourism and restaurants to retail and entertainment. 2 days off turned into a massive economic engine. But here's the twist. The 5-day week was built for factory floors, not laptops, Zoom calls, or creative work. Today, many jobs depend more on focus than fixed hours, and research increasingly shows that longer hours often don't mean better results. In fact, they often lead to burnout, stress, and diminishing productivity. That's why the 4-day week is gaining momentum. Trials around the world have found that working less can actually lead to better performance, improved mental health, and happier employees. It may not fit every industry, but then again, neither did the 5-day week, at least not at first. This is Whysdomia, where ordinary things get the stories they deserve. If this made you look twice at something you use every day, subscribe and stay curious, because once you start asking why, the world becomes a lot more interesting.